Now, before we go into depth and talk about how to beat and understand the weaknesses of each move from her 4 individual stances, let's first look at some of the common weaknesses that these 4 stances share at a high level. First and foremost, she cannot block in any of her stances. Doesn't matter if it's Kappa stance 1 or 2 or H&E or PTSW, whether she enters with plus frames from a string or just out of the neutral, 9 times out of 10 she must commit to something. H&E and PTSW are very powerful stances. This is balanced out by the fact that these secondary stances are locked behind primary stances. Now, despite the fact when she does her base attacks that make her enter into her primary stances with very good plus frames, her Kappa stance 1 and her Kappa stance 2, when she decides to transition into the secondary stances, those plus frames now become negative frames. This is very good for you because you can interrupt every single attack from a secondary stance, okay? Which means it is a risk for Lydia. Easier said than done, of course. We just saw this past weekend in the first offline tournament in like forever, where Blackbeard and Fergus enter into her PTSW and they were not interrupted. But then there are cases where the opponent did react and did interrupt them. So no matter what, it is a risk for Lydia. And this is not like Genghis or Fakaram when they're doing their charge up attacks and there's no animation cue when they're gonna let go and let those attacks ride. No. When Lydia transitions into her secondary stance, it's a very clear cue. You are well aware she has entered into her secondary stance. And because of that, in my opinion, you can train yourself to react to this. Not easy, but I do think it's doable. Of course, in heated matches, you may not be able to, but for the most part, like I said, it's doable. Especially if you take the time to learn her primary attacks that take her into Kappa stance 1 and Kappa stance 2. So memorize what forward forward 2 looks like, what down forward 2 looks like, what her 1-2-2 looks like, because if you at least know and are aware, because when she lands those attacks, remember, she has no choice. She does enter into Kappa stance 1 and 2 no matter what. She cannot cancel that. At least you can react a little bit early to the animation of the strings taking her into a primary stance, and that should give you a little bit more time to react to the primary stance as well as her secondary stance. And the last thing is more of a knowledge check than it is an actual weakness, but I've actually played people that honestly weren't aware of this, so I have to explain it to them. Outside of her up forward 4, which technically launches your opponent and then she gets into a juggle, so there's nothing you could do about that, which is why I don't really talk about it. When she lands her 1-2-2 or her 4-4-2 or her down 4-2, nothing's guaranteed, okay? Yes, she enters into Kappa stance 1 and Kappa stance 2 with plus frames, but nothing is guaranteed. So no matter what, you can block the next attack. So this is a knowledge check that you guys should be aware of. Moving on, we're going to go over some weaknesses of her jump back move. And this is shared between her 2 primary stances. So if she enters Kappa stance 1 or Kappa stance 2, she can press back and she does this jump back move, and it covers a good amount of range. And it also, as I'm showing you on the screen, has an unblockable attack linked to it. And that tends to make people a little nervous. First and foremost, if you really read she's going to do this, basically you're very confident, just duck and launch. Every character in game can do it. That would be my go-to option if I actually think she's abusing this move. Next, if you have quality movement, in a lot of cases, you can do one backdash. Honestly, that's all you need. You don't need to do backdash cancel, just one backdash and she will whiff and you can launch her, because she jumps really far back, but she covers roughly the same amount of distance. And that's pretty good. So if you're not mashing, believe it or not, in most cases, a simple backdash will deal with this. Even if she's coming off plus frames, it doesn't matter. Covers the same amount of distance, backdash, launch right there. You can interrupt this. This is not an option I would say go for, because I basically just told you guys not to mash, and there's a lot of good reasons for that, you know, coming from her stances in general, especially with the plus frames. But I'm showing you here, I'm interrupting with Lydia's I-11 move, so you can't interrupt it. You can parry this with certain characters. I just showed you couldn't with Asuka, but characters like Leroy, Jin, and I do believe Geese, they can parry it. So that is a decent option. It's very easy to do if you actually have the skills for it and you have the character that actually can do it. All right, moving on to the first primary stance. And let me first say, before we go forward, I'm going to refer to Kappa stance 1 and Kappa stance 2 simply as CFS. It's too complicated saying Kappa stance 1-1 or Kappa stance 2-2, and I will put a label at the top of the screen or something like that. So CFS 1 is I-19 high attack that has 2 pretty big weaknesses. And the first one, what I'm showing you on the screen here, is that it's extremely linear. I mean, you can easily sidestep this to the left or to the right, or sidewalk it to the left or sidewalk it to the right. Very, very linear. It is a high, as I said, so that is a primary weakness there, because you can duck and launch this. You don't have to worry about the block punishment, which it doesn't have anyway because it's plus on block. So duck and launch this or sidestep this. Those would be, in my opinion, the 2 ways to actually deal with this. Now, coming out of 4-4-2, which is plus 15, I'm showing you right here that this is uninterruptible because the move is I-19, as I said. So you have 4 frames. You can't interrupt this with a standing attack. You can, however, duck and then launch this attack, okay? So you'd have 4 frames is enough time for you to duck and launch onto the high, even if it's coming off of the plus 15. You can also parry this attack. This is something you just have to be aware of your character parry attributes, because some parries work on just the right punch, some parries works on just a punch, some parries or reversals work on just a kick, and some have different starter frames. So be aware of what your character can parry and can't parry. I will take that to the lab. And even though coming off the race drive you are at plus 27, you can still duck and launch this, which makes no sense to me. Let me just get that out right now. This is 110% gel on block when she does the race drive. I honestly think they need to fix that, but yes, you can still duck and launch this from the race drive. CFS2 is an I-17 frame mid, so you can't duck this, and this is a move that a lot of good Lydia players will use to keep you in check because it's safe on block and it's also a counter hit launcher. If your opponent does this in the neutral, it does have some decent tracking. You can sidewalk this to the left or right in the neutral if you actually time this well. It being safe on block, good for your opponent, but it is -9 on block, which is somewhat good for you because it's basically +9 for you. So you have a lot of pressure you can work with if you actually block this. Now, if your opponent does 4-4-2, it is +15 entering into the stance. And if they do this, there's no sidewalking anymore. The plus frames are they're just too great, you know. It is what it is. You can parry this. Check your opponent. Check your character, lab it, make sure it's something that you can parry. And coming off of the raise drive is the plus frames are great, so you're pretty much locked down. CFS3 is an I-26 high attack that is a natural launcher, so I-26 are legitimately slower. And coming out of a neutral, you can sidestep this to the left or to the right. The timing is a little bit tricky though when it comes to that, to be honest with you, so you have to time it. It is a high, as I showed you can duck and launch it. Now from 4-4-2, because of the plus frames, you can no longer sidestep this at all. You can reverse it though. Okay, so that's actually pretty good. And it is interruptible, as I said, it is slower, so you can interrupt this with an I-10 frame attack. I-11 will trade with it. You cannot interrupt this off of the race drive. The plus frames are too great, but you can still duck and launch this from the race drive. CFS4 is a mid attack that comes out in 28 frames, so this is your slowest attack coming out of Capitalist Stance 1, and it is +8 on block, so it's designed to make you regret just stand there blocking, but it is a really linear attack. Okay, even coming off 4-4-2 with the +15s, you can easily step this to the left or to the right. Of course, you can reverse or parry this. As I said, it's the slowest attack coming out of Capitalist Stance 1. You can interrupt this with an I-12, I-11, or I-10 attack. So if you have a good standing attack for those 3 at that speed, definitely use it. The plus frames are just too great coming off of the raise drive on block, so you can't step this or reverse this if Lydia does this, the raise drive on block. You just have to eat this attack. So real fast, let's do a quick overview of what I think at a high level how you want to deal with Capitalist Stance 1. And I will do this also for Capitalist Stance 2, so the 2 primary stances. Not going to do it for the secondary stances simply because I think once you guys get your reaction time down, you will probably be able to react and interrupt in a lot of cases with secondary stances. First and foremost, there is no mix up to Capitalist Stance 1 as I showed you. It is a high or a mid, okay? So you could take the risk of just ducking the 2 highs, but of course if you do that you can get caught by the mid, but you could choose to do that if you see your opponent spamming the highs. If you don't want to deal with it, you can just block and it will either be negative or plus, but nothing's guaranteed for your opponent after that. Or you can also do the option select of parrying depending on what character you have. There are, for example, if you're playing Jin, if you're playing Leroy, no, I'm just playing Leroy's fine now. But if you're playing Jin, you're playing Geese, you're playing Leroy, I think Asuka, whatever the case may be, depending on your character, you may just simply be able to option select for all the Capitalist Stance 1 options and just beat it out with the reversal or parry. Moving on to our Heaven and Earth stance, which I will refer to as an H&E stance. And we're not going to talk about the jump away strat, which I think is actually pretty funny. If you're that confident she's going to Heaven and Earth, then just interrupt it. If you're having trouble reacting to it for like the launch interrupt, then, you know, interrupt it with like a faster attack like an I-11 or I-12, something that's safe on block. Her H&E 1 is 16 frames in as a mid, and I'm showing you right here that it is step of water neutral to the left and to the right. However, coming off of the rage drive, she has +7, and it is much harder to step. I do not recommend even going for it because H&E 1 is a natural launcher. Okay, I have stepped it before, but it's hard. The timing is strict. Don't even worry about that. If you have a character that has a parry or reversal, this is an offensive option. Check it out. Like I said before, labbing it. You can't interrupt this coming off of the race drive because, you know, I-16 +7, you would need a 9 frame attack, which unless you're Yoshimitsu, you won't have. HNE2 is a low attack that comes out in 20 frames, so you do have a 50-50 mix up there with mid and low. You can step it to the left. Sometimes it can be a little tricky, if I'm being honest, even coming off 442. It is unsafe on block at -13, and this is a low, so it's susceptible to all weaknesses of lows, like a low parry as well as low crushing. So you don't have to block it. You can actually go for a launcher because it's low, you can low crush it. And coming off of the raised drive, it is much harder to step, but again, it's a low, and even with the +7, you can still low parry it as well as low crush it. So you can keep that in mind if you want to go for a launcher. HNE1+2 is a high attack that comes out in 16 frames, so tied with the speed of HNE1, and this attack guard breaks, so you just can't stand block. Of course, you can't in this case she has a low, but even if she didn't have a low, you can't just stand block because it guard breaks, guaranteeing her a 14 frame attack or faster. So for example, like her 12 frame attack, I believe, at the wall splats. So that's a concern. The tracking of this is really good. Even coming off of 442 where she has negative frames entering to HNE, the tracking is still really good. I don't suggest trying to step this. Just duck it and launch it. And ducking beats out the low too, so that is beating out 2 or 3 attacks. It being 16 frames, you cannot interrupt this coming off of her raised drive. You can still duck and launch this though. Now going into Cat Foot Stance 2, which has a little more depth to it because you have a few ways of entering this stance. We'll be really talking about 2 because one of them is actually a launcher. So CFS1 is a 20 frame mid, and this is very linear. Even if she's coming off 122 and she has +8 frames, this is still very steppable. So that's a very good option to step and launch this. You can interrupt this at I11 or faster. If you do a 12 frame attack, you should trade, so unless you're going to get like a counter hit launch, I wouldn't actually go for that. And you can also parry this, which I'm showing you right here. Now coming off down 4-2, she has plus frames. You can step this to the right. Stepping it to the left now is actually pretty hard. Okay, so just step it to the right, or just step the entire thing to the right depending on what they do. I just showed you can also parry from there, but you cannot interrupt down 4-2. Okay, so if she lands down 4-2, don't try to interrupt this attack. So CFS 231 is a high mid string that comes out in 14 frames. Now this could be a little tricky because it's 3 hits, whereas a lot of her other attacks are just 1 hit. The good thing though is that this is not a natural combo, and even on counter hit, this is not a natural combo, which is really good because I can actually see them giving her a natural combo on hit or counter hit simply because it's locked behind the stance. So that's good. The first attack is a high, so I just showed you can duck and punish that, but you have to usually do a fast punisher because the second attack comes out pretty fast. You can step the first 2 attacks of this string pretty easily to the left or right coming out of the neutral, and because it is multi-hits, you can launch before the 3rd hit actually comes out. Okay, so that's pretty good as well. And you can sidewalk this entire string to the left as well as sidewalk this entire string to the right as well. So when she lands the 1-2-2 and goes to stance, she does have +8, and of course it is much harder to step her. If you time it correctly, you can still step the first 2 attacks to the right. And in most cases, because she's +8, you will not be able to interrupt this with a standing attack, okay? I made a Tekken 7 hidden frame mechanics, and one thing I talked about was tech crouch moves. And in this is a good example because you can do a tech crouch move and actually go under the high and get a counter hit. You can also simply just duck and do a fast while standing punisher that works just as well, And this is actually parryable. You can I don't even know if parryable is a word, but you can you can parry the attack. Her down 4-2 into stance gives her +12, and at this point you can no longer step. That is completely out the door. You can also no longer do a tech crouch move. In most cases you need a certain amount of frames for the move to actually enter tech crouch or into crouching. You can still just simply press down and do a fast while standing punisher in most cases, but my point is you can do a while standing punisher. Now in this particular thing, I want to show an example where I took the down 4-2 to +12 and I was able to parry with Lydia with no problem every attempt. However, when I used Asuka, it's another test case, and I tried to do Asuka's reversal, which does work on punching attacks, okay? That first 2 is a punch. It's not like an elbow or anything like that. I didn't have the frames to reverse it. So if you guys were able to do this, basically let Lydia do her down 4-2 into her Cat Foot Stance 2 and then do the 2 string, and you're able to reverse, please post that in the comments below. But this is an example where I'm basically showing that the starter frames I believe is different. Even though Asuka has longer activation frames, the starter frames are different, and I wasn't able to reverse it with Asuka, even though I could parry with Lydia. CFS 3 is a 13 frame high attack. You need to be careful when you notice her doing this simply because this is a counter hit launcher. Okay, you can't step this to the right or sidewalk this to the right. This is a high, so major weakness, you can duck and launch punish this. If they land a 1-2-2 and go into this, the +8 makes it extremely difficult to step. In most cases, I was never able to step this. Interrupting this with a standing attack is pretty much not possible. Even a high crush or tech crouch attack, you don't really have the frames to work with. Now, you can duck and launch this, so that's kind of the go-to with the highs in my opinion. If you just want to be better safe than sorry, duck, confirm the high, and then just launch it. And you can actually launch punish this. You can reverse this, as I'm showing you with Asuka coming off the 1-2-2, but you can't reverse this. I'm showing you with Asuka coming off the down 4-2 because of +12, and that makes sense because she couldn't reverse the 2 string, and that was I-14, and this is I-13. Okay, but again, it's a high, so you can duck and launch this even coming off the down 4-2. CFS 4-4 is a low mid string that comes out in 19 frames, and even though I don't think it says it's homing in the menu or anything like that, and I don't see the homing indicator, this is extremely hard to step. Like I wasn't able to step this. If you can, please post this in the comments. And it is a low, so it has all the weaknesses that lows have. Like right there, I showed you can low parry it, you can low crush this, basically an attack that tech jumps. Okay, another weakness to a low. And like most hell sweeps, this is very, very launch punishable on block. So coming off Lydia's 1-2-2, so with the +8, the good thing here is you can still apply the weaknesses that apply to a low. I just showed you can still low parry this attack, you can still do move the tech jumps and low crush this attack, and nothing's guaranteed when she goes into stance, even with the hit frames, no matter what. So you can still block this, and this is launch punishable. This is really good for the primary reason I'm going to talk about right now. This being 1-2-2 being +8 on hit, and the 4-4 coming out of CFS2 being I-19 means that she can interrupt any attack that is I-13 or slower, and that's powerful because that means you will trade with the I-12 attack, right? Well, unless you have a 12 frame mid, you won't get that trade, which a lot of characters don't. So you should be able to beat this out with an I-11 attack or faster. However, this move has a built-in defense where it tech crushes, so it high crushes. And I talked about this in my Paul Green Rank walkthrough. Because of that, in most attacks that are I-11, okay, coming out of standing, I'm talking about 99%, those are high, so it will beat that out, which means that this move in most cases will beat out most attacks unless it's an I-12 mid. So that's why it's still really good that you can apply the low crush properties. Whereas if you go into the down 42, for example, I'm showing you here, you can't low crush anymore, or I wasn't able to. It's very, very difficult. Okay, now I was still able to low parry, and I was still able to block because, again, I said this multiple times, when she does an attack that goes into her stance, nothing's guaranteed, meaning that you can block all of the attacks. So that's still really good. CFS 1+2 is a 17 frame mid, so this is your fastest mid attack coming out of her Catholic stance too. Believe it or not, this is actually unsafe on block at -10. I feel like for something to be unsafe on block with her, it has to be a low, so that's kind of interesting. Showing you here, you can step this to the right or left coming out of the neutral. Now with the 1-2-2 with the +8 that she has, I was able to step this to the right no problem, but I did struggle to step it to the left. And parrying this was not an issue, obviously. Plenty of frames that are parried. With the down 4-2 +12, I was not able to step this at all. And I feel like because there's a 5 frame gap, you should be able to. So if you guys was able to step this coming off the down 4-2, please post that in the comments. And I'm showing you right here that you can parry CFS 1+2 coming from down 4-2 as well. CFS 2, in my opinion, is much more dynamic than CFS 1, even from entering the stance in terms of what you have to worry about, because you technically have 3 ways to enter the stance versus CFS 1, where it's just 4-4-2. Yes, you do have race, but that's kind of a special circumstance. And actually, to be fair, CFS 2, you have really 2 court ways. That's 1-2-2 and down 4-2. I don't count up 4-2 because it's really just launching your opponent, and because you only can enter stance on hit. So you really need to study the animation and be aware of when your opponent enters Catholic stance 2 from 1-2 versus down 4-2, because you have a lot more defensive options when she does 1-2 versus down 4-2. And just dealing with Catholic stance 2 in general, you have to actually deal with a 50-50 mix up, whereas for Catholic stance 1, you can stand block everything. Yes, the plus frames suck if your opponent gets it, but nothing's still guaranteed. Whereas here she has a couple mids, her 4 is tech crouches and basically has some pretty good tracking. So and it's a 3-hit string, so you have to, it's just more to deal with coming with CFS 2. So in a lot of cases you really are going to have to kind of just observe and pick up on your opponent's tendencies. At a high level, if you crouch block, you will beat out 3 of the 5 options because that's 2 highs and a low. And remember, for CFS 1 and 1+2, Those are mids, but they're not natural launchers, so it's not the end of the world if they actually hit you. And coming off 1-2-2 for the rest of these examples, you can step CFS 1 and CFS 1+2 to the right. You can step the first two attacks of CFS 2-1-3 to the right. That being said, if your opponent lands the entire 1-2-2 string, it is a lot harder to step CFS 2-1-3 to the right, which is kind of tricky to me. I don't know, it's kind of weird. If you have a good reversal or a good parry, you can beat out 4 of the 5 options from the CFS 2 stance. PTSW1 is a mid that comes out in 22 frames. This is steppable to the right. You can also sidewalk this left as well as sidewalk this right in the neutral. Now, if your opponent lands down 4-2, they will be -7, but this still does track a little bit to sidestep left. Same thing with 1-2-2, which is -11 for the transition, which is pretty bad. But again, still somewhat trackable to sidestep left. So be careful with sidestepping this move to the left. If you're gonna go left, sidewalk it left. PTSW2 is a mid attack that comes out in 15 frames, and this is our fastest attack out of our PTSW stance. This virtually has no tracking to the left like whatsoever. You can easily step this to the left or easily sidewalk this to the left. Now, even with the horrible transition frames, the tracking to the right is very, very good. So down 4-2 -7, still hitting me going to the right. 1-2 -11, terrible frames, still has some good tracking to the right. But stepping this to the left is, what does Negan say, easy peasy lemon squeezy, just no problems whatsoever, or sidewalking to the left. PTSW31 is a mid string that comes out in 17 frames. The first attack is very linear. You can easily step this to the left or to the right. And in both cases, when you step this, you have time to punish your opponent before the second attack comes out. And the entire string is sidewalkable to the left as well as sidewalkable to the right. And in this case, it honestly doesn't really make any sense whatsoever to show 1-2-2 or down 4-2, because this string really doesn't have any strengths that could potentially carry over. Whereas the last PTSW2, it tracked to the right. So we wanted to check, in down 4-2 at -7, does it still track to the right? Or 1-2-2 -11, does it still track to the right? This string doesn't really have any strengths like that. PTSW4 is a low attack that comes out in 20 frames, and it's a low, so it has all the weaknesses we've talked about early in this video. So you can low parry this, you can low crush this, and this is unsafe on block at -12. So while standing or full crouch, 12 frame punish will work greatly on this. If you want to beat this attack based on movement, I do not suggest single stepping this in either direction. Doesn't matter if it's out the neutral, from down 4-2, 1-2, it really doesn't matter. This move will usually, from my experience, will track if you do a single step left or single step right. I usually sidewalk this, and for the most part that works much better. Not always, because it does require a little bit of a timing, but for the most part, sidewalking left or right will work. She does have a 2 extension when she's in rage for her rage drive. That is a mid attack. This is -12 on block and forces crouch. So basically the same type of punishment as before will suffice. I don't suggest trying to sidewalk this entire string. I know that might be a tempting option, but in all my labbing, the 2 will clip you in pretty much every situation. You can, however, sidewalk the low and then punish before the second attack comes out. So that is a viable option. So this Tekken 7 how to beat Lydia guide / Tekken 7 Lydia stance weaknesses video is done. So if you guys like the content, and I really hope you did, because this video took way longer for me to finish than I thought, please consider liking and subscribing. I say this multiple times and I mean it from the bottom of my heart. All support is greatly appreciated, and the comments you guys have been leaving on my videos just really gives me confidence to just keep working hard and keep pushing, making these videos for you guys. If you guys like Tekken 7, Dead by Daylight, Mortal Kombat, artwork, discussion posts, videos, things like that, please consider checking me out and follow me on Instagram. This is Acid Light. You guys take care.